Okay, let's get right into this because this is an incredibly important video. So, a lot of people have been wondering after learning about the millions and billions, and it might even reach up to trillions of dollars worth of abuse to the Social Security system. Although it would appear that the greatest level of abuse hasn't even really been reported on yet, which is the changing of the math of the cost of living adjustment to be basically anti-claimant, anti-beneficiary, pro-government, pro-SSA. But I'm sure Musk at some point will get to that. Point is, and I need to make something very clear. As you know, I talk with some of the people in the government, and I talk with some of the people who are directly outside of the government. So I have agreed to be read in on a few little details. So some things I can't touch on. So if you see me say I can't talk about it, that's the reason why. Now, the Department of Government Efficiency is just getting started and has already begun its evaluation of the Social Security Administration, both at the macro, big, and also the micro level with its analytics. As a result of this, Elon, his DOGE, his D.O.G.E, is doing traditionally what OIG offices are supposed to do. OIG is the Office of Inspector General. All these different agencies and groups have their own version of an OIG, an Office of Inspector General, and then there is a big OIG that oversees all the other OIGs. So, for example, which is what actually happened when the Social Security Administration had its OIG, basically, it was claimed that she was attacking the whistleblowers. The higher level OIG basically took a review to it. The senators took a review, and they wanted to make sure that the OIG was, responsible in what it was doing with reviewing these situations, which are very grave. Kosher, thank you for doing a 1 month what you call it appreciation membership. Very, very cool, very cool. All right, so he said I have no idea what this is, but I'm clicking it. Thank you for joining it. I appreciate it either way. So here's the deal. As a result of all of this, the difference is that the D.O.G.E from an OIG is that the D.O.G.E is less restricted by internal restrictions that the Office of Inspector General's offices usually have applied to them. And the D.O.G.E also seems to have more bandwidth capacity for getting things done with finding and publishing the issues. As a result, to be fair, we do not know, but we can project that the D.O.G.E is likely looking into Social Security recipients and how many are potentially fraudulent. Now, for the people saying that this is a massive breach, remember the massive breach, which most of you forgot happened in December of 2023. So, just to help remind people a little bit about this whole thing, this is what happened back in 2023, December. It was the largest data breach in the history of America. Very, very sad. Let me go through real quick. Huge data breach involving Social Security numbers could impact millions of Americans. New National Public Data Background Check Company says it believes the breach occurred in December of 2023. Real quick, what happened? There was a company. The company basically was doing, searches for background checks. They would scan faces. They would check the internet, do all those things. And as a result of that, unfortunately, all of those files that they were using, I think it was like 270 something Americans, were stolen and put onto the dark web for sale. And then another thief, a digital hacker, stole it from the person who stole it and then basically published it themselves on the dark internet. And as a result, you were able to go and check on another website to see if you were one of those individuals of the almost 300 million who had their social security numbers slapped onto the dark web. Real quick, Royalty 72, thank you for the $10 donation. That's awesome. Let me put a heart there. Another $10 donation from her. Yeah, actually, I did try to shoot you a message with the private chat, but it didn't work. So I tried to do the call feature, and that does work. So we can definitely catch up. Warrior CRPS, thank you for the $5 donation. That's awesome. Let me put a little happy face there, a little heart on that one. That's very, very cool. So here's the thing. Is Elon essentially, this thing where he basically has gone in and done all this, yada, yada, and, no, that is purely just political back and forth from Democrats against Republicans. And if you saw, it was either today or yesterday, Martin O'Malley, among a couple other Democrats, were saying, don't let the Republicans touch our Social Security benefits, which, to be fair, is the model that Democrats have to use to attack Republicans. However, what's happening is we're in this post-woke era, which is where the traditional two things that Democrats would use to attack Republicans, which is, of course, race and Social Security benefits, isn't as strong as a leverage weapon as it used to be. So as a result of that, it's one of those things where Democrats have to refigure out what the direction of their party is going to be as Republicans try to figure out what the entire Washington D.C. monster has under its big old dress. And that's the scary thing about it. We don't know how much fraud there is, and we are just getting a glimpse into it now. Of course, the judges have shut down basically, the mass opportunity of Elon to go in and check things to more limited search results. But to be fair, we don't know what they've saved. We don't know what they're looking into. And what makes people scared is that Elon is an efficiency monster, right? He's hiring all these young, very, very bright individuals to do significant analytical research on this. So now here's basically what you need to know about it. There are, of course, OIG red flag lists. There are, of course, probably, D.O.G.E red flag lists. That's how they go ahead and categorize their analytics. The actuary will sit there and put it into this spot and say, okay, we're going to look at this. This doesn't look right. Now, many of these red flags, they can be used for all kinds of things: VA compensation, Social Security disability, SSDI, SSI, retirement. Some of them are for retirement benefits and the abuse and fraud that can occur in that area. Now, keep in mind that they are in partial read-only access right now as a result of the court order to restrict their full access. However, what they find and figure out can be used to hand over to OIG for OIG to investigate people, which should worry some people on disability benefits because, the more they pull things, the more they research things, the more they go ahead and go onto the internet and do this and that and pull information and search it all, the more things are going to pop up. That's the reality of it. So currently the SSA is in also a unique spot. The SSA has created what's called their major CDR and OIG investigation mode. The next video we're going to do is talking about the actual internal document released by the SSA that is essentially a document that explains the pool rules for how they're going to be investigating lots and lots of people this year. This is going to be the year where you're going to be seeing more investigations than you have basically last year and the year before that, because they had to go ahead and switch people back to CDRs from those who had been moved to trying to work on the 1.12 million backlog of people that they can't even get to process because they just don't have enough people. So the bottom line is this: currently the SSA is in a major CDR and OIG investigation mode, even though the backlog of applicants continues to grow. Normally these reviews happen on a schedule, right? Where basically you have the medical improvement expected, the MIE, which is like, 6 to 18 months, this kind of area, but usually they put it at 12 months to 2 years. Then you have the medical improvement possible, the MIPs, which are basically every 3 years. And then you have the medical improvement not expected, which is the 5 to 7 years. And then you basically have those where there's just not, it's terminal. There's not going to be any review. There's not going to be any point. It's just set way out. And that doesn't even have its own traditional category other than potentially terminal, etc. Now, what happens is this: medical evidence is one of those things where it could show suggested improvement. And this would put you as a red flag on the list of the D.O.G.E or OIG. If medical records show improvement in the disabling conditions that you were found disabled with, or potentially the one disabling condition with the listing level approval, then the SSA may initiate a CDR on you. CDRs are kind of like your introductory review. When you get a full CDI unit review, that's where they send out investigators to actually talk to your neighbors, talk to the businesses you go shop at, and then at some point potentially meet up with you, or they may hold back and just film you. A lot of people also, I've noticed in the comments, talk about how there's no such thing as CDI units, or they'll say that CDI units are, not realistic. They don't have the money. Congress actually funds the CDI units through a special funding group to make sure that they're doing as much as they can to investigate Social Security recipients. It's a special fund aside from what the Social Security Administration usually gets. So just to be clear on that, they do have their funding set up through a different set of principles. And with that said, to be very clear, I come from the other side of that fence, which is where people hire me for that 1 hour review all the time. That private session where I, take them, I take their thing and I looked at all their notes and I say, okay, you need to watch out for this. This is what you need to do. Here's the timeline of what you have to do. Where they hire me for a private session. I see CDI unit claims all the time. So to me, they're not this shadow, over in the corner somewhere. To me, they're part of the weekly schedule. They're all the time. But again, to people who have never had a CDR or never had a CDI unit review situation, to them, they're unicorns that don't exist. And for those individuals, I hope and I pray that they never actually have to go through it, because you get a lot of disabled people with mental impairments, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, whatever, some sort of mental impairment, and their life is ruined and wrecked by this event, because they don't know when they're being investigated. They don't know when they're coming out with the cameras. Their neighbors ask them and they'll say, yeah, this guy stopped by asking about you and blah, 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 asking about what you do. And some of the neighbors, they like their disabled, neighbor. They like them. Some of the neighbors hate their disabled neighbor, and they will go ahead and give them information, the SSA investigator, incorrect information to try and hurt their disabled neighbor. So it's always, it's just a tough situation. You never know what you're going to get. But I wanted to clear with you some of these red flags so that you understand specifically what to expect with them. So if you're having a medical evidence suggesting improvement, okay, so basically your impairments are starting to look better, sound better, etc., right? That's a red flag. You're going to potentially end up on an OIG list or D.O.G.E list. So where do they get this info from? They get it from doctor's notes, right? Nurses' notes. They get it from therapist notes. They get it from receptionist notes, medical imaging like MRIs and X-rays, radiographic reports. They get, pretty much a doctor who's trying to show that you have some improvement so that the insurance company will keep basically, paying for that doctor to see you. Those are a sand trap. Let me tell you, when there's a doctor or a therapist or, some individual who like wants the insurance company to keep paying them, to keep seeing, man, let me tell you, those medical documents, there's always showing some improvement. You got to be really careful with therapists. You got to be really careful with those types of individuals, right? Chiropractors, that kind of stuff. Next one is maybe a medication is alleviating the symptoms. The doctors write it down. You said, yeah, I'm doing a little better. Yeah, I feel okay. Yeah, da da da. Next one is even being fully compliant with treatment can sometimes trigger notes of historic likelihood of improvement where it is expected from a particular treatment that you will improve, right? So they've had such success with medical treatment with this drug or such success with medical treatment with that therapy that you are expected to improve. And then they write that into the notes and boop, the AI program inside the SSA catches it when they get your records via 827, which is their HIPAA. So another thing is reduced medical reviews. So the days of people getting on disability benefits, and then not having to follow up with appointments or emergency room treatment like they were, while they were seeking benefits, those days are over. So if you get your benefits and drop out of the medical world and don't go to these doctors and those doctors and these doctors and those doctors, if you don't keep building, right, then you're going on a red list, right? You're going on a red flag list. So what do I mean by that is, let's say you've got this doctor, this doctor, this doctor, this doctor, and this doctor. But then once you're found disabled, you drop out this doctor. Sorry, I can't, my hands are a little messed up from working on the tractor. You lose this doctor, you lose this doctor, but you keep these two. Or perhaps you lose this, and you lose this doctor, but you keep these two. Whatever it is, if you're not keeping up with the specialists for each of the impairments that you are found disabled on, then you are setting yourself up for being on a red flag list. Let me explain. Some of you are found disabled on a listing level criteria. That means listing level, you were as bad as a pre-listed impairment, okay? And as a result of that, the SSA said, woo, this person's bad just on this one impairment. Therefore, we will give you disability benefits at element 3, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Element 3, magic door, because you meet, equal, or exceed a listed impairment. Or put more simply, you are as bad as, equivalent to, or more severe than a pre-listed impairment. Most of you do not have those approvals. Most of you have like a grid out or a vocational allowance. And so with grid outs and vocational allowances, they look at basically all of your impairments in totality, all of them in totality, which means that you got to make sure you have a specialist for at least your top 5 impairments in that giant list of impairments that you have. That way, continuation going forward, right? the SSA can see that you have repetitive, continuous medical treatment and then the occasional crisis medical treatment. If you don't have that, it's red flag situation. And the reason why is because the SSA has been abused with people getting, the crazy check, the mental check, the eating the grapes off the wallpaper check, right? The vines on the wallpaper, all those classic phrases that they would use. The point with that is that the SSA had so much fraud and so much abuse. And what didn't help was the whole 9/11 VA situation. I don't know if you guys researched that, but that's a hot pocket on its own. But the point of it is that as a result of all this abuse, the SSA, through the government, said, okay, we're going to develop an entire police force that essentially will investigate Social Security recipients. And now they're also investigating VA people as well. So just keep that in mind, when it comes to all this, you need to have repetitive medical treatment and you need to have medical treatment for the doctors for your particular impairments, aka a PCP and all the specialists, right? You got your one doctor, that's your PCP, that's your family doctor, and then you got all your specialists as well, all your specialists. Cool. All right. Now, with that said, another red flag situation that could create, you having a red flag with, for example, OIG or D.O.G.E. is a failure to follow prescribed treatment. If the SSA learns that a beneficiary is not following prescribed treatment without a valid reason, it could potentially trigger a review or an investigation. Because, review is like a CDR, continuing disability review. An investigation is a CDI, investigative unit, basically following you around. So let me give you some examples of how that would work so you understand how the SSA might start, investigating you by putting you on a red flag list. Number one, not picking up medications. Okay, that pops up in these reviews. That pops up in these ROIs where they basically look and see, this person hasn't been buying their medications. They haven't been renewing their medications. They haven't yada, yada, yada. Another thing is not requesting more medications. If you, basically run out and you don't go and, call your doctor and say, hey, send it over to my pharmacist, all of a sudden you are creating a red flag situation for yourself. The next one is not going to scheduled medical appointments. Now, if you fall into essentially, the mental impairment where just getting out the door, going places, trying to go ahead and interact with the public, if that's really tough for you, right? I get it. It's totally fine. Just make sure it's on the medical record. But if you're just not going to schedule medical appointments because you're just missing them because you feel like, I don't have to, I don't need to, my impairment's not going to get better, nobody's going to check in on me, please let me assure you, in 2023, they designed a program with artificial intelligence that literally checks on you, checks on the status of you, checks on what's going on with you, checks to understand how things are going with your medical treatment. In 2023, again, please understand that when you're not going to your medical doctors, that will put you on a red flag list, okay? Next one, making statements that you aren't going to do what your doctor told you to do. Sometimes you guys will tell the nurse that, I really like this medication, but I don't really like that one. I know you prescribed, but I don't really take, I know you guys are trying to sometimes be cute with the receptionist. Guys fall afoul of this all the time. There'll be a cute receptionist, right? And not that women can't too, not that they can't, but there will be a cute receptionist, right? And the guys will, I hate taking this because I don't feel like I can't ride my Harley and blah, blah, blah. Guys, none of these medical personnel are your buddy. None of them are your friends, not the receptionist that the doctor hired. And if she's very pretty, just think for 2 seconds, why is she so pretty? Just take that in for 2 seconds. Just, you know what I mean? Also, right, and it could be a really good-looking guy, too. I've walked into medical facilities, and I've been like, well, that dude's a GQ right there. He's a model, you know what I mean? And then the doctor comes out, and I'm like, okay, all right, I'm connecting the dots now. They're not your friends. They're their own little team. You're your own little team. The SSA is its own little team. The secret army the SSA has, right? The CDI units are their own little team, all right? So bottom line is, don't try to be cute with making statements about what you will use, what you won't use, etc. Next thing, continuing to do an activity that would cause your medical conditions to remain severe or starting some activity that makes them more severe. So if you're doing painting as a side job and then you fall off a ladder, right? And you end up at the hospital again, even though you told them that you were going to be doing any more painting because you had hernia issues, a back issue, blah, 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 blah. And guess what? It's going to be on the record again. And now the AI chatbot that's inside the SSA is going to boop, find that stuff very quickly. Another thing, drugs, alcohol, smoking, vaping. If you're on benefits, and they just remember they have a thing for each of these, although vaping's not really in it. Drugs, it's part of the whole DAA thing, drugs and alcohol. Alcohol, part of the whole DAA thing. They have a specific thing for nicotine, smoking, stuff like that. Vaping is the new one. If you are on disability benefits and you think that you're going to get to stay on them using drugs and alcohol and smoking and vaping, you're not going to be on them for long. Let me tell you why, the timeline. Let's go all the way back to the year when I started the law firm after working for a couple of other disability law firms. Let's go all the way back to 2013. In 2013, I worked with a lot of homeless people that were users and abusers. Worked very hard. I got a lot of them through. We got them through programs. We got cute little certificates, which in many times were totally useless because they didn't follow them going through and they kept going back. Because let's call it like it is. When you're homeless, you end up on the streets again. And what are you using for pain medication? You guessed it. But the point of it is the judges don't want to approve users and abusers. And the system does not want to allow the continued users and abusers to receive benefits. Incredibly important for you to understand that. Incredibly important for you to fully just get that point. You know, I know you want to sit there and smoke and ride your Harley to North Dakota. I get it, but you're not my problem. You're your own problem. You either fix that shit, you call the 800 number for the state to quit smoking, or you don't. But realize they are not going to want to pay you going forward with this stuff. And here's what happens. I'll tell you exactly how it comes down. The way it comes down, because I read these CDRs all the time, the way it comes down, right? And there's two levels of this, right? There's the people who buy the stuff themselves and use the stuff themselves. And then there's the people who are a little bit smarter, right? A little bit smarter than that. And they have their kids or their parents or their friends buy it for them and then bring it to them. But here's what happens. At some point, some sort of medication problem, some sort of condition problem, some sort of societal in the atmosphere of wherever you are problem arises, and you end up in the emergency room. And when you end up in the emergency room, it's in your system. And then all of a sudden, the SSA has a positive on a urine test, on a hair test, on a whatever to blood test, whatever. And then all of a sudden, they have right there on that day, at that time, with that test, a specific notation that gives the SSA firepower to do a new CDR analysis. What's called is the 8-step sequential process. And they have to run it twice. One for if you didn't have, one for if you did have the user abuser and didn't have the user abuser to see what the outcome would be. Because they have to find out whether or not you were disabled if you weren't using abusing. Now, if you're smart, you might be sitting there thinking, wait a minute. Isn't that giving them a lot of gray room to decide if I am a user and abuser and if that use and abuse is making my impairments severe enough for me to essentially be found disabled, right? Is that one of those situations? So, you know, the bottom line here is this, okay? Just to clarify, the bottom line here is you have to understand, and I get so frustrated with this stuff because you have to understand something. The government works off of paperwork. And if you give them the opportunity to have paperwork that basically creates an outline as to, you know, what your current existence is, right? How much use and abuse you're doing, how much drugs are in your system, how much alcohol is in your system, right? Some of you guys, I had one of those 250 private hours the other day where I did a private session. It was a DUI for a person who's not supposed to be able to drive, who had alcohol in his system. Okay, I get these things all the time. If you create the paperwork for the SSA, they are going to use it against you. So please be smart about it, right? We pay our entire life into this program and we give them all the keys and all the rules. And to be fair, the Republicans want to F us over, right? With making us receive less of our benefits. And the Democrats want to tax the rich, which is never going to happen. So you got the Democrats constantly whining and, promoting things that are never going to fix or never going to happen. And then you have the Republicans over here proffering a fix that sucks. And the bottom line is we want to hate it because we don't want that, right? We don't want the crap fix. We want the system to just work like it's supposed to. But the only way that'll happen is if the government can actually achieve proper ROIs, return on investments from what we pay in, which they can't do unless they have a sovereign wealth fund, which they're just getting started. But we'll see how that goes, right? We'll see how that goes. How much do we trust the government to properly invest our money? I don't trust the government much. I don't think you would either. Next one, okay? Physician notes where you are working a side job and it slips, and when you're talking to your doctor and the side job is causing your impairment to become worse, red flag right there. Lab tests showing things are in your system that are not meant to be there, not just drugs, but other stuff too, right? You might have an imbalance of something that's created by something you're doing. Choosing, and this is a big one that we had. This one caught me off guard the other day. I realize that some of you have either no religion or religion. There's not a lot of you in between, right? When it comes to that, where it's a little, it's either, and I see that in the comments. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the middle that don't want to deal with both sides getting all on them. But the reality is when I see from the comments, it's either there's no religion there or it's extreme hard religion, Choosing religion over a physician's advice for treatment. There are varying levels of this, okay? But you'll see it in the Muslim, the Jewish, the Christian, etc. religions where people will put it into God's hands and not take the meds or, not do the therapy because their religious leader told them, try this or go this direction or that direction or this direction or that direction. It's a problem because you are creating the red flag that will take away the benefits you use to be able to survive and have four walls and a ceiling. So just realize that is the weight that you potentially put on your own shoulders when you play that game of saying, I'm going to go ahead and ignore Western medicine and go this route. Remember, the SSA is a Western medicine group. That's their gig. That's what they use. It is not a business in the religious game. Okay. Not that I say game in that point, but they're not in the, saying this religion is correct or this version of God is correct or whatever. Okay. So they're not in that. They want Western medicine applied. So when you choose something that's going to pull you out of, continuous repetitive Western medicine, usage in an appropriate way as prescribed to you, you're going to get into red flag territory. Next one, advances in medical treatment or technology. So if new treatments become available that could improve the disability, the SSA may review the claim. All right, so this is the category that is going to make things change with disability benefits the most in the future. The big pharma companies are losing control over cure releases in other countries. So all of a sudden, things that were severe impairments, right? They didn't have cures back in the day, but now some of these are starting to have cures for both mental and physical impairments. A small chunk of my clients go to Mexico. They go to Israel for treatment, and magically, after some stem cells here, some magical immunotherapy drug there, all of a sudden they're cured or they're so much better. It's not something that's really going to affect them in a negative way going forward. I know some of you in the comments will say that God restricts you from stem cells and cures, and some will say that they can't afford the travel costs. I get it. I understand every person has their own thing, but this is just so that you understand. Science has mapped out the entire genetic code, right? The entire DNA sequence. They have just officially completed, and this is brand new news. This came out like a couple of days ago. The first teleportation experiment. They did it. They teleported a micro particle from point A to point B. So in the future, 5 to 10 years from now, and I know you guys are like, oh, I'll never see that. It's going to take 50 years to get there. In 5 to 10 years from now, they will be able to teleport into your body a new liver. Don't use that to your drinking advantage. I know how some of you, I love you all, but don't, you know what I mean? Hey, potentially a new heart, the buildup in your arteries, all kinds of stuff will be teleported into your body in the future. I understand some of you vehemently go against that. 5 to 10 years, they're going to have that. Okay. Quantum entanglement, quarks, the whole thing. That is where they're going. They've officially done it. Go look it up. It's in the science mags. It's incredible. It's mind-boggling. Because remember, basic technologies that save the human race, being able to particle create things that we need to survive out in space, teleportation, shields, energy shields, controlling gravity, and not just in the levitation sense, which is one of the cool parts. It's not the coolest part. Controlling gravity so that you can protect the Earth from a black hole out there. That's the big item. Not to mention, if you can control gravity, you can basically change travel. You don't have to worry about the speed of light. You can do all kinds of things with it. So you either fall into the category of never wanting to work again, or you would love to go back to work, but in the future you won't have the choice because the SSA will expect you to get the surgery, and you'll need some sort of medical reason why the surgery would be worse than not having the fix. So my point is, just expect some changes with this going into the future. There's going to be a lot of new tech coming out and a lot of new ways that people are cured and then potentially have to go back to work. Now, as a side note with that, away from these red flags that we're talking about in this video, you will see rules, protections being proffered in the future for those people who have been out of work for a certain amount of time on disability benefits. So how there's the 10 rule, 20-year rule for veterans when it comes to keeping their benefits, even if they improve. You'll see like a 15-year, 20-year rule or something like that for those who have been on disability benefits for that time, where they don't expect them, even if cured, to go back to work. You'll see something like that integrated to protect those individuals who have been out of work for such an extended period. Or that's the Democrat side of me. Or you'll see the Republican side of me saying, no, they'll just put them back to work. They'll just put them back to work. And you guys know I try to create very, middle of the road videos, although it is very spicy right now. I did see some of the Democrats screaming at the Republicans about how the Republicans have, basically done all these horrible things to Social Security. But to be fair, it's not a hard counterpoint to make. Hey, guys, last 4 years, you know what I mean? The last 4 years. So, hey, you know what I mean? And then they'll say, oh, but they sabotage and da 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 da. Hey, we had Commissioner Martin O'Malley, best Social Security commissioner I've ever seen. Okay. Then the Democrats didn't give him the DNC chair, which was the biggest betrayal to Social Security benefits you could ever see. Because if you're going to empower the Democratic Party with people in power positions, race and Social Security, those are the two right there. You got to make sure the top contenders are the top players from that marketplace. And one of the best commissioners from the SSA to not place them into a high level Democratic role, that was a missed opportunity and an F up. That was a major F up. Now, that's not all. Democrats in large didn't vote for that. It was the DNC members, part of that group, that voted for that. But still, be aware that was a fumble, a major one. Next one, another red flag. Beneficiary reports improvement. If the recipient voluntarily tells the SSA that their condition has improved, a CDR, of course, may follow. So let's say they send out the CDR form and you walk them through symptoms that you no longer have, or signs that you no longer have, or medications that you have opted out of. So let's say the SSA calls you for something and you share information about your improvement. Now, most of you are not going to do that. Most of you are not going to whoops on that, right? Some of you might, but most of you are not going to. Look, if the SSA personnel are ever giggling and laughing with you on the phone, just be careful. Just be careful. Now, if you're a low IQ individual, like 70 points or below, you got to watch out when they're talking to somebody at the SSA, because they think that they're helping their claim and then they're actually hurting their claim. And now they have statements to use against the person, which go into an actual report that gets handed over to a DDS CDR reviewer. Just keep that in mind. All right, so let's say, SSA calls you for something, you share information about your improvement. Let's say a neighbor potentially reports you to OIG and says you are doing all these things that you claimed you couldn't do on your reports to the SSA. Let's say a 3380 form, third-party RFC form, goes to a third-party contact about your functional abilities. Could be a ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, ex-wife, ex-husband, somebody who's not in love with you, right? And then all of a sudden they're filling this thing out and okay, negative statements now on the record about you. Let's say a CDI unit follows you around for 2 weeks and notices that sure do get around quite a bit with that car that you claimed you couldn't drive because of your back impairment, your eye impairment, your range motion impairment, etc. So there's another thing, okay? And this is kind of the biggie here. And I'm going to summarize it down because I did a much, much bigger video on this, but it's important to understand this, okay? So bottom line is this, then there is fraud and similar fault, okay? So if your social security, or sorry, so if your social security number was stolen and somebody's doing something with it, you're on a red flag list. If you steal somebody's social security number and you're using it, you're on a red flag list. If you share a bank account with another recipient, that you're on your way to being on a red flag list. Or you work under the table, red flag list is on its way. Or you own a company as a disabled person, those people almost always end up on some list with some checkpoint to see what's going on as a self-employed person, or financial assessment for SGA violations, substantial gainful activity violations. Or you are not using your Medicare as an aged person. Remember, they send out this form, the SSA 7162, okay, when you hit 85, and they send it out again even farther up the poll. But it's basically the report to us within 60 days document. It says you have to look it up, SSA 7162. It's a report that says, are you alive? Are you there? Right? They send it out. And then basically you have 60 days to go ahead and respond back to them. Otherwise, the benefits are cut off. This is also the form that they can use to catch kids, and they do use it quite a bit. If you go to the OIG website, you're going to see the fraudsters getting caught. But it's what they use to catch kids of dead parents who are still collecting and spending the dead parents' retirement checks. So this thing does pop up. It is something that you need to be aware of. Now, there are situations where people will assume the role of someone who disappeared. And there are situations where someone has multiple social security numbers that they're using for different things. And it's not just, spies and things like that. There's people in America who have multiple social security numbers where they're doing different things to collect different things. Or to be fair, the thing that's actually more common than that is it's a dealer who will have a bunch of, users who need the, the use and abuse drug, right? And so what will happen is the dealer will collect all their social security numbers and anything they can and fraud anything they can by opening loans against those social security numbers against those users. That's how it usually happens, which is absolutely horrible. I've seen it happen before. Now, one thing that I've had to learn with all of this stuff is that the system is getting better at not letting fraud be created. But the local field office people, the regional field office people do not usually study the OIG pages or the convictions that, the district attorneys, et cetera, working with OIG actually come through with. So when you hear and talk to Social Security field office people or regional office people, and you talk to them about all this fraud, they're like, no, that can't happen. We have this. No, that can't happen. We have this. And then I tell them, look, today, and I go right up to the OIG website. Today, this is who was convicted, who used to work at the SSA, who frauded basically, kid benefits off of a survivor, and then put that fund into another bank account, slid it into a PayPal account, and then slid it over to their account. And that's usually very shocking for them because you remember, the system is supposed to work a certain way. Although, when social security numbers are involved and social security numbers control votes, it gets a little spicy for both sides. But we don't know who's getting the Benny on this advantage, all right? So what happens with this situation is, I've seen SSA personnel commit felonies. I've seen clients, non-clients commit felonies. We now know there are over 6.5 million social security numbers active of 112-year-old people who aren't even alive for the most part, yet still have reported income to them. There are loopholes with the SSA systems that don't get cross-checked with the IRS. But I will say this, the SSA is getting better at closing these loopholes. I do believe the D.O.G.E is getting to be a very strong force, to innovate away scams that are happening with the SSA. New immigrant social security numbers, transfer of wealth into the monetary system from countries like Ukraine into the USA with IRS approval is blatantly in your face. But there's other stuff that you don't see that's, kind of more under the carpet. So the reality is that I make these videos in a neutral way. If you feel D.O.G.E is being too aggressive, then consider, why was OIG not aggressive enough, right? Or was OIG being very aggressive, but we just didn't know? We couldn't find it. We were just seeing convictions and we weren't seeing enough of them. America is clearly, in our government, filled with fraud. In the billions, it might reach to trillions. You can love or hate Elon Musk. Totally up to you. I can't tell you which way to go. You've already made up your mind. But the majority of you, I would say, love him because of how you voted, and the minority of you hate him. All right. But what is interesting about this whole situation is basically why people love him or why people hate him. Think about this from the middle stance, from the the independents, the non-Republican, non-Democrat people. Let's say you have a bunch of Einstein level brains doing actuarial work. They find a report and its oddities, right? The Democrats have been complaining about Republican fraud for years. The Republicans have been complaining about Democrat fraud for years. This is the first time we have had the ultimate CEO type look at the government and hold it to the standards of how the private industry would operate. Now, the Democrats will scream at me and say he's not a super CEO or an ultimate CEO. He's the richest guy on planet Earth, right? That doesn't own a country, right? He has massively successful businesses. He used to be put up on the highest level by Democrats because of all of the green technology innovations he was doing with batteries and cars and all kinds of stuff. And it's just, but politically, if go study it, you'll see how Biden started to pick on him. He started to pick on Biden, and then these two were fighting. And then, all of a sudden, Elon wasn't getting invited to car events on electric vehicles and yada, yada, yada. So the point is, now he's a political figure. But what I need you to keep in mind is that there's going to be good and bad that comes from this investigation that D.O.G.E is using. And the courts are going to have to figure out how much access he gets. He only has read only, but the trick of the White House is they're saying, well, we're just going to put all these people on administrative leave and then pay them to get out of town to shut down that department. I don't know why Trump's going through all this. He has the House, he has the Senate. If he wants to get rid of some agency, some department, he could just use Congress to do it. I don't know why he's throwing this all on D.O.G.E. D.O.G.E is quick. That's why they're getting all the heat here. They're the ones moving and grooving and making things happen, though. But think about it from the middle here. Because remember, everybody likes to go to the right. Everybody likes to go to the left. Just think about it from the middle. How horrible would it be if things just kept going and the fraud wasn't put out into the light? Right? The Wuhan lab stuff, right? The politicians that received money from Ukraine, right? What happened with this thing in the past, what happened with that thing in the past, right? We've now got essentially things about, the Kennedy family and the assassination that occurred. We haven't gotten UFO stuff in Area 51 yet, but, maybe that's on the horizon. But the point is, imagine if we didn't have this stuff. Would that be worse? If we just kept letting the money flow to things that it wasn't supposed to. A lot of you aren't working right now. So imagine if you go back to your working years and you're sweating, you get home, you're tired, you're pissed off, your dog misses you. And then you find out this many billions of dollars of which all of your money you paid into was used for some country you have nothing to do with, that has no advantage to you as a person having a standard of living that makes sense. Where do we draw the line on how much fraud we want to find out about? I guess is what I'm saying. That's the middle ground, right? So how do we get less government fraud without people being reviewed? How do we do that? The OIGs have made statements about how they can't review certain things that are known for fraud because of personnel and budget limitations. Okay, fine. That makes sense. So my point is, when it can't be done with what we have already set up in the government system, how do we ever find out what fraud is in the corners? How do we ever find out what fraud exists and is creeping around? And remember, not all the fraud that we're being fed is probably as accurate as it is being fed to us. But at least we know there's something going on. And at least we know there's something in the background looking at it. I guess what I'm saying is just think about that. So many of you have screamed that the fraudsters of Social Security ruin it for everyone. But around half of you are ready to burn D.O.G.E on a tree with fire atop some sticks while they're working on figuring out where the fraud is. Point I'm getting at is there's a simple question. Is the review scarier than the fraud? It's a tough question. If the review is scarier than the fraud, then how did the fraud get so bad that people were afraid of the results? If the characters are afraid of the results, then why does our government have such limited civil rights to protect our citizens? If the privatized people are so scary, right? These people that are existing, these super CEO types, right? You got your Bezos, your Elons. You could throw Trump in there, but I know a lot of people say he's not a CEO that can do stuff because he has a bunch of failed companies. Then why don't we have better laws to protect the money that we pay in? Can anybody explain to me why people are not properly protected? Can anybody explain to me why Americans do not have better civil protections from their own government? We certainly needed them when we created the Constitution. We just don't seem to have a lot of those being used right now because things are being done in the shadows, and it's not good. I've said it before, the greatest presidential action for all of you is really simple. It is to give you a privatized right to your Social Security benefits. If that happens, it doesn't matter that the trust funds run out or that the millennials can't afford the boomers. They must then have investment money that they use to pay for your benefits, because you could sue them if they try to reduce your benefits. These are the basic civil rights that you need to protect yourself and your benefits that you paid for your entire life. So half the country loves what is going on with this investigation. Half, the country is afraid that they will lose their benefits because they're never really had a right to them in the first place, right? They're fearing political, red flag lists, right? The Democrats could potentially fear being put on a list just for being a Democrat, okay? And to be fair, when Biden was in, the Republicans were fearful that they were going to be put on some list if they put a Trump flag out, right? That's the same thing, and the fear is valid. The fear is valid. Don't think it's not. Point being, there is a clear fix to all of this. That's why it is so scary to be flagged by OIG or a red flag from D.O.G.E. It's because people don't feel like they can have a fair chance keeping what they have already paid for. And at some point, we are getting close to each year, people will start chanting that Social Security, basically is theft, right? They're not getting the money they need to be able to survive out of it. It keeps getting reduced as a result of cost of, the COLA, the cost of living adjustment math, which is screwing people over. Let me ask you all this, okay? And I see some of your comments here, and I see you're all, you're spicy. I get it. I get it. Let me ask you this. When the statistics come out showing that you would be a multimillionaire if your benefits were invested into average yield securities, but they aren't because the government took your money, gave you back a minuscule return on investment, and now you have a quasi-failed future. What do you think is going to happen when the millennials give up on your future, the boomers, right, and those that are right below the boomers? What do you think is going to happen? We've had incompetent politicians and a benefit system in the trillions that in many ways they've already spent a lot of. It's a spicy situation, and I don't think people really understand what's going on. At the end of the day, the government has no real plan figured out other than to create a gridlock between Democrats and Republicans. The Republicans offer a solution that sucks because people get less and have to retire later. The Democrats offer a solution to make the rich pay more, which is never going to happen because their entire party is based on rich people paying for stuff. Which is ironic because they're all about tax the rich, but yet they get all their money from the rich. And then when they go ahead and do their dinners, the people talking at the dinners are the rich. So you have Republicans who are unpopular with that stuff. And then you have Democrats who are basically, screaming one thing, but are funded by the thing that they're screaming to get, to harm. It's just, it is what it is. So it's a spicy situation, far more spicy than the D.O.G.E. on read access only. But some of you will say, how dare you say these scary things will come out? Look, we have to grow up a little bit as a community who deals and looks at this stuff. And I'll tell you what is coming. If you can't appreciate knowing ahead of time these major problems that are growing when it comes to these benefits, where you are, personally attacking people who are saying, okay, this is something you need to watch. This is something you need to be aware of. I get it. I get it. I see people attacking other social security channels. I see people attacking politicians. I get it. I see people attacking people for religious purposes, political beliefs. I get it. But promise me this. At the end of the day, you can only really hate yourself when it all comes down and you not preparing for it. Only put that blame on your shoulders at that point. If you chose to say God won't let you prepare, or that your political party requires you to do this and that, then that's your thing. Everyone else that wants to know what the future is or where it's going, let's keep grinding towards how to be successful in future America. It's not going to be what it was. It's never going back to what it was. So let's be smart and get in front of the problem. Now, let's look at what Senator Wyden is sounding the alarm on. Senator Wyden has done a really good job complaining about things inside the SSA. He's done both, Republican complaints and Democrat complaints. Let's take a quick look. This is produced on February 7th of 2025. Wyden sounds the alarm on D.O.G.E. accessing Social Security systems containing American sensitive personal and financial information. Let's just go through real quick exactly what's in here, okay? All right, here's the way it is. Washington, D.C. Senate Finance Committee ranking members Ron Wyden, Democrat, Oregon, sounded the alarm following reports of D.O.G.E. operatives accessing the Social Security Administration's data systems. After taking control of the Department of Treasury's payment system, Semaphore reported yesterday that D.O.G.E. is seeking access or has even already accessed the SSA's systems. As the nation's largest benefit-paying agency to more than 70 million seniors, people with disabilities, and children, the Social Security Administration is the hub for storing America's most sensitive medical and financial information. D.O.G.E.'s access to the SSA's data system is an invasion of both Americans' financial security and privacy, including people's bank and credit information, social security numbers, birth and marriage certificates, and citizenship status. Career civil servants who are required to follow strict federal and state laws and regulations manage these records to protect tens of millions of seniors, adults, and children's health and financial information. In the letter to Acting Commissioner, okay, Wyden underscored, okay, as the central hub for Americans' most sensitive personal and financial information and the nation's largest benefit-paying agency, D.O.G.E.'s actions represent a two-front invasion on Americans' financial security and privacy. The information collected and housed at the agency could have significant commercial value as well as competitive advantage for individuals seeking to use it for financial gain. Likewise, it could be misappropriated to target American citizens and businesses for political and exploitation-based purposes. So what he's saying is, we give them this information, and now all of a sudden, this super CEO has access to information that he could use in his corporate interests. He knows who's getting what. He knows who's paid what taxes. He's basically gotten access to, essentially, all of the people's secrets, right? You get access to the U.S. Treasury. You know what everybody earns. You know what everybody pays in taxes, etc. Everybody's secrets, okay? Current federal law protects Americans' private and sensitive information from being improperly disclosed and misused. D.O.G.E. has not publicly stated its reason for needing to access such private and sensitive information as protected under federal law, including the Privacy Act of 1974 of the Social Security Act. Wyden continued, quote, without appropriate oversight, transparency, and accountability, our nation's healthcare, retirement, and disability systems, and the privacy of millions of Americans are at the political whims of President Trump, congressional Republicans, and the D.O.G.E. Now, to be fair, the Republicans have, the House, the Senate, I got the White House. So to be fair, I'm not totally sure, other than the court system, who can really slow down the Republicans with this stuff. And I don't disagree. Privacy rights, all of a sudden we've got a new agency, and the new agency overnight is getting access to all this stuff. Hey. Now, what I think people feel more comfortable with is some guy or some female or some woman or somebody, maybe the guy is balding. His only job for the past 30 years of his life has been basically upkeeping these forms, watching over these systems. He wears an old wool suit with a very, very 1980s tie. And his only thing that he does is go to work for the federal government. He doesn't have any other business interests. He doesn't really have much in the bank other than his 401k that he put away. We feel more comfortable with that because it's not somebody who's going to take the information and use it for some other purpose. But the problem with that guy is that fraud seems to keep happening. And that guy was aware of it, but ordered people to still allow payments to occur. So then we got to ask, what's scarier, the review of the fraud or the fraud itself? All right, now, to ensure proper government oversight, Wyden demands Musk and Trump must respond to the following questions. Has D.O.G.E. or any individual or entities operating under the guise of or direction of D.O.G.E., including such individuals who may have been onboarded to the agency and received an agency or departmental email address, requested and or received access to any SSA system that is used in determining eligibility or benefit amount of Social Security or SSI benefits? Okay. So first question that Wyden says, can they access Social Security information at all? Right? Not just what the US Treasury has, the IRS has, stuff like that, but the benefit, basically eligibility determination system. Question number 2. Has D.O.G.E. or any individuals or entities operating under the direction of D.O.G.E. gained access to SSA databases that include personally identifiable information, wage or tax information, or personal health information? Well, just to be clear again, remember 2023 December, that stuff was all on the dark web. It was all on the dark web anyway. So it's like, it was all right there. It was all right there. All right. But anyways, they're saying, did they get access to the wage information, this or that? I'm pretty sure at this point we know that D.O.G.E. did get access to it, but then they were restricted by the local judge ruling. Question number 3. Have any private or commercial servers been connected or integrated into the SSA data systems to review, edit, modify, access, delete, move, or otherwise change the data? Now, this is the good question. This is the best question from Wyden, because this is the one where we're like, whoa. Okay, let me read it to you again. Have any private or commercial servers been connected or integrated into SSA data systems to review, edit, modify, access, delete, move, or otherwise change data? Because underlying that question is the question of, where did D.O.G.E. get access to a server farm that was created, funded, upkept by the federal government? Because they ain't cheap, right? Server farms are not cheap. Next question. Because, the thing is, like, if he didn't have a federal government server farm, then maybe he's using a different server farm that he paid for. Because remember, he's got tons and tons of servers. You know what I mean? Tons and tons of servers. Number 4, what steps has the SSA taken to ensure that the data of individuals, beneficiaries, and healthcare providers are not misused for politically motivated purposes? And this is a good question, right? We want to know, is our information being used to create more systems that are going to fight us? Is our information being used to create systems that are going to kick us off of benefits? Are these systems that D.O.G.E. is putting in creating red flags that will go ahead and put us in a category, that'll put us into a tiny box that ultimately makes it more difficult to access the things we normally would be able to get, but for D.O.G.E. creating the system? So bottom line with this whole situation is, that's the thing that scares people the most. What are the red flags, and how do the red flags actually apply to the situation that D.O.G.E. and OIG have when it comes to benefits? Now, with that said, the next video I'm going to be doing, very important, is about the emergency internal notice that the SSA has just released about CDR reviews. As you know, they have been ramping up because they've been putting a bunch of people into trying to process the backlog. They gave up on it at the beginning of 2025, and now this is revision 3 of the emergency notice letter, which was just published to the internal side and the external for website review on the emergency notices of the SSA website. We're going to be going through that emergency notice in the next video. If you like these videos where we talk about the left and the right from the middle, and what's good and what's bad and what's working and what's going on, I still go back to the same question. What's scarier? The investigation, right? Or the fraud that they're finding? What is scarier? And the thing is, they may not find as much fraud as we think they will. Or they may find unbelievable amounts of it. Okay? Unbelievable amounts of it. Although they've started to come out with stuff where it's just like, holy cannoli. Because a lot of the conspiracy, and to be fair, I definitely sat back and I was like, boy, you go back, 6-7 years ago or whatever, I was like, man, it's a lot of conspiracy theories coming from the right. You know what I mean? about, what's going on with this or that. And then we get to the COVID conspiracy theories, which are like its own massive category. But they did mostly turn out to be correct. And to be fair, right now they have financial proof of a lot of those. So again, I go back to what's scarier, the investigation of the fraud or the fraud that they find. That's the whole thing's scary, yeah, right? Right. So Enith says it's scary. It's all scary. It's not something that makes me feel good. It's not something that makes a lot of people feel good. It's all scary. And here's why. At its very core function, nobody likes to be audited. People hate being audited. Being audited sucks because you're constantly being checked to see what you have against how good you were at keeping your books and doing the right thing and this and that, da da da. There was a time where people would tell the Social Security Administration to basically go fluff off, even when they had their benefits, because their privacy was their privacy and they can't be in their business. We don't live in that era anymore. The government, the politicians, Democrats and Republicans, specifically fund a secret police force that investigates recipients. I don't know if you guys have ever sat back and looked at it from the middle view. Both Democrats and Republicans specifically fund a secret police force inside CDI units to watch you guys. Oh no, this Democrat is my friend and that Republican's my friend. Oh, okay, sure. Okay, yeah, we'll go with that. All right. With that said, please remember to just be open. Think about it. Think about both sides. Just consider it. Please remember to like and subscribe. We got 625 likes, but we got 1,400 people in here. Hit that like button. Give it a good like button push. With that said, the thing that always makes me very happy, if you want to, you can go over to Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida on Google. Throw some stars up there. I absolutely love seeing that. I do go live on Mondays and Thursdays. Although we're playing with those days right now because Mondays are just miserable. There's so many calls, so many things that have to be done. It's really hard to go live on Mondays and answer a bunch of questions from people during the live session. With that said, also, if you want to do one of those private sessions where it's the 1 hour, the little mini contract is below in the bio area. That's where you got a situation. You call me. I don't represent you, but I tell you what you should be doing to try and fix it. With all that said, I will catch you guys at the next video in about 15 minutes. Give me about 15 minutes to get a drink, and then we will go from there. But that is going to be specifically on the new emergency message released about doing CDR reviews on a massive amount of disability claimants. So I will catch you at the next one. We will go through it. That way you're educated on it. You're good to go. You know what to do. You know how it's working. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. I'll see you in 10 to 15 minutes. We'll go from there. Attorney Walter Hnot, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.